It begins as a walk. Just a walk into the trees. She had been told not to go in at night. Everyone in Cluj-Napoca had been told, at some point in their lives, usually by a grandparent with serious eyes and a voice stripped of any warmth. The forest has a way, they said. It watches. It waits. It takes. She didn't believe them. That was the first sign. The second was the light. Her phone died. Fully charged 2 minutes ago. Screen black. Camera offline. The flashlight app gone. She was standing in total darkness in a forest that had swallowed hundreds of people and never explained where they went. She would later tell investigators that she didn't know how long she stood there. It felt like minutes. Her watch said it had been 4 hours. When she finally found the treeline and stumbled back into the world, she turned around. And then, she realized she was no longer alone. There are forests. And then there is Hoia Baciu. In the northwest of Romania, tucked against the western edge of Cluj-Napoca, one of the country's oldest and largest cities, there exists roughly 250 hectares of woodland that has accumulated more than half a century of documented fear. Researchers have studied it. Tourists have sought it out. Paranormal investigators have returned from it changed, or not returned at all. The local people, those who have lived in its shadow for generations, give it a simple, chilling distinction. They call it the forest that eats people. The name itself comes from a shepherd, a man named Baciu, and the story attached to that name is where the legend begins. But the fear predates the name. Archaeological evidence suggests human habitation in and around this forest stretching back thousands of years. Ancient clay figurines were discovered here, relics from Neolithic settlements, suggesting that people have always been drawn to this place, and perhaps always been disturbed by it. Romanian folklore has always treated Hoia Baciu with a specific kind of reverence, the reverence reserved for things that cannot be explained away. Locals speak of the forest the way people speak of very old curses, not with disbelief, but with the measured caution of those who know better than to tempt something they don't understand. Children are kept away. Animals reportedly refuse to enter. Even horses, animals not known for their sensitivity to the supernatural, are said to balk at the forest edge, eyes rolling, refusing any command to proceed. The phenomena reported from Hoia Baciu are as varied as they are persistent. Over decades, visitors and researchers have documented orbs of light, apparitions, unexplained burns on skin, intense nausea, overwhelming anxiety, electronic failures, missing time, disembodied voices, and physical markings left on the forest floor that no natural explanation has satisfactorily accounted for. The forest has appeared in international documentaries. It has been the subject of academic studies. It has been investigated by everyone from Romanian parapsychologists to American film crews. And yet it remains, stubbornly, inexplicably, a mystery. But to understand what the forest is now, you have to begin with what it was. You have to begin with a shepherd, a flock of sheep, and a disappearance that no one has ever explained. No one knows exactly when it happened. The date, if there was a date, was never officially recorded. In the oral tradition of the region, the story exists the way certain truths exist, not in documents or timestamps, but in the repeated telling, in the way a grandmother lowers her voice and a child goes very still. A shepherd. 200 sheep. The forest. All of them gone. According to local accounts passed through generations, a shepherd who had been grazing his flock in the fields bordering the forest one day led his animals into the trees. Perhaps he was chasing a straying animal. Perhaps he was seeking shade. Perhaps, and this is the version whispered most quietly, he had no choice at all. As though something had called to him, and the calling was not the kind you argue with. Neither the shepherd nor his 200 sheep were ever seen again. 200 animals and one man. Not a single trace. No bones. No wool. No blood. No disturbance in the soil that might suggest where they had gone, or what had happened to them. Search parties reportedly found nothing of use, only the unsettling sensation, shared by multiple searchers independently, of being watched from somewhere they could not identify. Skeptics have offered explanations across the years. Wild animal attack, though the sheer scale of 200 animals makes this scenario almost impossible without some evidence. Deliberate flight, the shepherd absconding for reasons unknown, driving his flock across the mountains. But this explanation collapses against geography and the absence of any subsequent sighting. The simplest explanation, that the story is simply a legend grown more detailed with each retelling, cannot be entirely dismissed. But it also cannot quiet the question that every version of the story ends with. Where did they go? The forest offered no answer then. It offers none now. And in that silence, the legend of Hoia Baciu took root in something deeper than folklore. It became the first entry in a long, strange catalogue of things that went into the forest and did not come back the same. Or at all. This story has a name attached to it. Or rather, it had a name, though out of a respect for privacy that the story itself seems to have little interest in, the name has long since been absorbed into the broader legend of Hoia Baciu. What remains is the account, reported, repeated, examined, of a 5-year-old girl who walked into the forest and did not return for 5 years. 5 years. Search parties were organized. The community mobilized in the way that communities did when a child was lost. With urgency, with fear, with the quiet devastation of people who understood what the forest had taken before. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And the months accumulated into a silence that felt less like absence and more like erasure. She was gone. And then, 5 years later, she wasn't. According to accounts of the incident, and it must be acknowledged that the factual documentation of this story is entangled with years of retelling, the girl reappeared at the forest edge wearing the same clothes she had disappeared in. The clothes showed no significant wear or deterioration. She appeared physically unharmed. She seemed, by surface appearance, exactly as she had been 5 years before. But she remembered nothing. Not the forest. Not where she had been. Not what she had seen, or heard, or experienced during 5 years of absolute absence. When asked where she had gone, she could not answer. When asked how long she had been away, she had no understanding that any time had passed at all. To her, the experience was instantaneous. She stepped between the trees and stepped back out. 5 years of the world's time had elapsed in what felt to her like a single breath. Investigators, researchers, and scientists who examined the case in subsequent years were unable to produce a satisfying explanation. Missing time phenomena, the experience of losing hours or years with no corresponding subjective awareness, appears consistently throughout the documented history of Hoia Baciu. It is one of the forest's most reported and most deeply unsettling features. Not the fear of what might harm you, but the fear of simply losing time. Of the world continuing without you while you stand frozen in a moment that never ends. The girl grew up. She never entered the forest again. She never explained why. Somewhere near the heart of Hoia Baciu Forest, there is a place where nothing grows. Not struggling vegetation. Not stunted shrubs. Nothing. A roughly circular clearing of approximately half a hectare where the soil is exposed, where no grass has taken root, where no seedling has survived, where the forest, which covers everything around it with dense, layered, aggressive life, has simply stopped. It is called the dead zone. And even that name fails to fully capture what it is. Scientists have tested the soil in this clearing repeatedly across decades of investigation. The results have been consistently baffling. Elevated levels of radiation have been recorded, not dangerous levels, not the kind that explains immediate physical harm, but levels significantly above the surrounding forest. Soil samples have revealed anomalous chemical compositions. Some researchers have noted that plants transplanted into the clearing's soil from elsewhere begin to wither within days, while those same plants, returned to normal soil, recover. Something in the earth of the dead zone is hostile to life. Geologists have proposed theories involving underground rock formations that might concentrate naturally occurring radioactive materials. Others have suggested contamination from an unknown historical event, industrial, military, or otherwise. Some researchers have pointed to unusual electromagnetic readings in the clearing, fluctuations in the Earth's local magnetic field that could, in theory, affect plant growth and animal behavior. None of these explanations have been definitively proven, and none of them explain what people report experiencing when they enter the clearing. Not just the absence of life, but the presence of something else. A pressure on the ears. A weight in the chest. The sensation, described independently by dozens of visitors across decades, of being observed from all directions simultaneously. Of standing at the center of attention of something very large and very old that has no interest in being understood. People who have spent extended time in the dead zone report physical symptoms afterward: nausea, disorientation, a persistent headache that lasts for days. Some have described the experience of walking out of the clearing and finding themselves unable to identify which direction they came from, despite the clearing being small enough to see across entirely. The forest provides no exits. Not readily. Not without cost. The catalog of phenomena associated with Hoia Baciu Forest is unlike that of any other supposedly haunted location on Earth. What distinguishes it is not the dramatic scale of individual events but the sheer variety, the range of experiences reported by different people across different decades. This is not a forest with one ghost. It is a forest that seems to generate something new for everyone who enters it. The most commonly reported phenomena begin with the lights. Floating orbs of light, blue-white, gold, occasionally deep orange, have been documented in Hoia Baciu since the earliest systematic investigations of the forest in the 1960s. Photographs. Film footage. Video captured on multiple platforms across multiple decades, all showing the same phenomenon from different angles and by different observers who had no knowledge of one another's experiences. Some of the orbs are small, pinprick intensities barely brighter than a star. Others have been reported as larger, basketball-sized, some accounts say, though these claims are harder to verify. What the lights are, no credible scientific explanation has resolved. Ball lightning has been proposed, a poorly understood natural phenomenon involving floating plasma. But ball lightning is extremely rare, short-lived, and does not typically behave with the apparent purposefulness that witnesses describe. Bioluminescent organisms have been considered, then dismissed. The forest's biology does not support the varieties that produce light of this intensity. Reflected light from the city is spatially impossible given the distances involved. The lights remain unexplained. Beyond the lights, visitors to Hoia Baciu consistently report a phenomenon that is harder to dismiss as misperception: electronic failure. Cameras shut down mid-recording. Batteries that read fully charged drain to zero within minutes of crossing the tree line. GPS devices lose signal in areas with clear sky access. Radios produce static where transmission should be clean. Mobile phones reboot spontaneously or fail to power on at all. This is not anecdotal hearsay. It is documented in the field notes of multiple scientific expeditions, in the after-action reports of paranormal investigations, and in the frustrated video logs of countless visitors who captured their dead devices on whatever backup camera survived long enough to record the evidence. People report physical symptoms that begin inside the forest and persist for days afterward. Unexplained burns, rashes in circular or geometric patterns appearing on skin with no identifiable cause. Nausea severe enough to interrupt expeditions. Headaches localized to the temples or the base of the skull. A generalized anxiety that long-time visitors describe as qualitatively different from ordinary fear, not triggered by any identifiable stimulus, not localized to any perceived threat, but pervading, absolute, cellular. The kind of fear that lives in the body below the level of conscious thought. And then there are the voices. Disembodied voices. Not the sounds of animals, not the acoustic tricks a forest can play with wind and wood, but voices. Speaking. In recordings made in Hoia Baciu, researchers have identified audio anomalies that they cannot account for. Sounds with the spectral profile of human speech, captured on multiple microphones simultaneously, present in the recording but absent from the perceptions of the people who made it. EVP, electronic voice phenomena, is a controversial area of paranormal research. In most locations, claimed EVP recordings are ambiguous, contaminated, easy to dismiss. The recordings from Hoia Baciu are harder to dismiss. Not because they are clearer, but because they are too consistent, too specific. Different recording sessions, different researchers, different equipment, and the same voice or something that sounds like the same voice, asking the same question. No one has yet determined what the question is. In 1968, a biologist named Alexandru Sift pointed his camera at the sky above Hoia Baciu Forest and captured something that would define the location's paranormal reputation for the next half-century. The photograph shows a circular, disc-shaped object above the tree line. It is distinct. It is unambiguous. It does not correspond to any aircraft design in civilian or military use at the time. It has been analyzed by multiple independent photographic experts across the decades since it was taken, and while the full range of natural and technical explanations has been applied, no analysis has produced a definitive identification. Alexandru Sift was not a sensation seeker. He was a working scientist, a biologist with the professional habits and institutional caution of someone whose career depended on credibility. He had been investigating Hoia Baciu systematically, documenting reported phenomena with the rigor appropriate to scientific inquiry. The photograph was one data point among many, but it was the data point that traveled. It was published internationally. It appeared in UFO research journals, in newspapers, in early television documentaries. It placed Hoia Baciu on a global map of anomalous locations at a moment when UFO research was moving from fringe fascination to something approaching legitimate study in certain academic circles. The forest was no longer merely a local legend. It had become an international mystery. But Sift's photograph was not the first reported sighting over Hoia Baciu, nor would it be the last. Accounts of unusual aerial phenomena above the forest extend backward through the 20th century. Luminous objects seen hovering above the canopy, lights descending into the clearing, craft of undetermined origin observed by multiple witnesses simultaneously. The volume of these reports, their geographical consistency, and their persistence across time have led some researchers to propose that Hoia Baciu is not merely a haunted location but something more specific and more scientifically intriguing. A hotspot. A place where something, electromagnetic in nature, dimensional in origin, or otherwise beyond current categorization, occurs with a frequency and intensity that makes it observable and documentable. Not a paranormal location in the Hollywood sense, but an anomalous zone where the physics of ordinary experience are, somehow, different. What was Alexandru Sift attempting to document, in those years of systematic investigation? What did he believe the forest was? His notes, where they survive, suggest a scientist wrestling with the limits of his framework. He documented. He measured. He photographed. He was honest about what he could not explain. And the list of things he could not explain was very long. Science has tried very hard with Hoia Baciu. Beginning in the 1960s, with Sift's own investigations, and continuing through the following decades with increasingly sophisticated instrumentation, researchers have applied the full toolkit of physical and biological science to the forest's mysteries. The results have been, without exception, deeply ambiguous. The soil anomalies in the dead zone are real and measurable. Elevated heavy metal content. Abnormal pH levels. Radiation readings that exceed background levels without reaching genuinely dangerous thresholds. These are facts. They are documented, replicated, confirmed by multiple independent laboratories examining the same samples. The disagreement is not about whether the anomalies exist but about what they mean. Geologists have proposed that unusual rock formations beneath the forest might concentrate naturally occurring radioactive elements, uranium, thorium, radon, in ways that affect the soil chemistry and electromagnetic environment above them. This theory has some evidentiary support, and it could account for certain reported phenomena. The physical symptoms, the electronics failures, even some of the psychological effects. Exposure to elevated radiation and unusual electromagnetic fields can cause nausea, anxiety, disorientation, and perceptual distortions. If the forest's geology is unusual enough, science has the bones of an explanation. But the bones are incomplete. Geology does not account for the orbs of light. Electromagnetic anomalies do not explain the missing time. Soil chemistry cannot produce the voices captured on recording equipment. And the consistency of the dead zone, its perfect geometry, its absolute barrenness, its apparently ancient persistence, does not align with any geological process that researchers have been able to identify as its cause. Dr. Adrian Patrut, a Romanian chemist who studied the forest, noted that the trees within Hoia Baciu exhibit physical deformities, twisted trunks, bifurcated growth patterns, spiraling bark, that are consistent with exposure to unusual electromagnetic fields during their development. Trees that grow in areas of strong electromagnetic disturbance develop in atypical ways, bending and spiraling as their cells respond to external fields. The trees of Hoia Baciu are, by this reading, a living record of the forest's anomalous environment, their bodies shaped by whatever force occupies this place. The forest writes its secrets in the language of wood. Psychologists have attempted to account for the reported experiences through the lens of suggestion and priming. The argument is straightforward. People who visit Hoia Baciu know its reputation. They arrive expecting strange things. Their nervous systems, primed for threat, find strangeness in ordinary stimuli. A bird call becomes a disembodied voice, a trick of light between trees becomes an orb. The anxiety people report may be self-generated, the product of an environment they have been told is dangerous. It is a reasonable argument. It explains something. But it does not explain the photographs. It does not explain the radiation. It does not explain the girl who came back 5 years later wearing unchanged clothes and having lost no time. Science looks at Hoia Baciu and finds real anomalies surrounded by questions it cannot, yet, answer. Every mystery attracts its theories, and Hoia Baciu has attracted theories the way dark matter attracts mass, in quantity, from all directions, with force proportional to the depth of the mystery itself. To examine these theories fairly is to enter a landscape of ideas where the reasonable and the extraordinary occupy adjacent territory, and the line between them is less clear than anyone would prefer. Begin with the Earth itself. Beneath Hoia Baciu, according to some geophysical surveys, the rock formations are unusual. Not spectacularly so, not uniquely so in the global context, but unusual enough. Fault lines, some researchers suggest, run beneath the forest in a configuration that creates piezoelectric effects when the rock faces stress, electrical charges generated by the compression and deformation of crystalline materials underground. This effect is real and well documented in other geological contexts. It can produce electromagnetic fields at the surface. It can, in certain conditions, produce visible light, blue-white orbs of plasma, generated not by supernatural forces but by the friction of the Earth's crust. Under this theory, Hoia Baciu's lights are geological. Its electromagnetic anomalies are geological. Its effect on electronics is geological. And the strange biology of its trees, the spiraling, the deformation, is the visible record of a continuous, low-level geological process that has been shaping this landscape for thousands of years, long before any human being was here to be frightened by it. The theory is elegant, it is grounded in real physics, and it explains a great deal. It explains everything except the voices, the missing time, and the 5-year-old girl. The second major framework approaches Hoia Baciu from the inside out, not from the geological substrate but from the human nervous system. Mass suggestion, collective priming, and the extraordinary suggestibility of the human brain in environments perceived as threatening are well-documented psychological phenomena. Infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below the threshold of conscious hearing, is produced by some natural geological formations and industrial structures, and at certain frequencies it creates profoundly disturbing effects in human subjects. Feelings of dread, of presence, of not being alone, of being watched. Infrasound can cause visual disturbances, emotional dysregulation, and the sensation of disembodied voices. If Hoia Baciu is generating infrasound, through its geology, its topology, the specific way wind moves through the dense tree canopy, then the psychological experiences it produces might be entirely real as experiences while being entirely natural in origin. The fear is not irrational. The forest is not supernatural. But the forest is producing something that the human mind, without the vocabulary to name it accurately, interprets as supernatural. A machine for making ghosts out of sound waves. This is a compelling theory. It is also an entirely unsatisfying one, because it accounts for the experiences while dismissing what the experiences contain, and what they consistently contain, across decades of independent reports, is more specific than mere dread. The voices say things. The lights move with apparent purpose. The missing time takes exactly as long as something. Then there is the theory that lives at the edge of what physics currently permits and perhaps just over that edge. The theory that Hoia Baciu is a zone where the geometry of spacetime is, for reasons unknown, locally irregular. A thin place. A fold in the fabric of whatever separates here from elsewhere. Now from then, this dimension from adjacent ones. It sounds like science fiction. It is also the only theory that accounts for missing time without contortion. If the local geometry of time is genuinely different within the forest, if time passes at a different rate inside the boundary of the anomalous zone, then a child who enters in one moment and exits in another has not been taken. She has been held in a temporal eddy, a pocket of local time that moves at a different rate than the time outside it. 5 years outside. A breath inside. Not a miracle. A physics problem that current physics cannot solve because it does not yet have the equations for it. This theory aligns with reports from dozens of other globally documented anomalous zones, locations associated with unusual electromagnetic readings, unexplained lights, and missing time. They appear on every inhabited continent. They cluster along fault lines and geological boundaries. They have been generating human fear and wonder for as long as human beings have been capable of both. Hoia Baciu is, by this account, not exceptional. It is a member of a global family of such places. The most famous, the most documented, the most persistently strange, but not alone. The fourth theory draws all the previous threads together and pushes them further. The geological anomalies, the electromagnetic disturbances, the temporal effects, the visible phenomena, all of these, under this framework, are not the primary mystery but the secondary evidence of one. A primary presence. Something that uses this location intentionally, drawn here by its unusual properties, the electromagnetic richness, the relative isolation, the long human history of respectful avoidance, and that has been using it for longer than any written record extends. The UFO connection to Hoia Baciu is not merely SIFT's famous photograph. It is decades of correlated reports from witnesses who were not photographing the sky but simply living near it. Farmers, hikers, city residents on the western edge of Cluj-Napoca who watched things above the forest that they had no framework to describe. The consistency of these descriptions, across generations of witnesses with no access to each other's accounts, suggests not a shared myth but a shared observation. Something is in the forest. Something has always been in the forest. The question of what it is remains, as it has always remained, open. Today, Hoia Baciu is one of Romania's most visited paranormal destinations. This is not a small distinction. Romania has no shortage of destinations that trade in darkness and mystery, from the towering shadows of Bran Castle to the medieval streets of Sighisoara. But Hoia Baciu occupies a specific place in that geography of the uncanny, because it cannot be performed. There is no tour guide whose dramatic voice makes it frightening. The forest requires no atmospheric lighting, no costumed actors, No manufactured dread. It provides its own. Paranormal investigators have descended on the forest in increasing numbers since the early 2000s. Teams from Romania, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, equipped with thermal cameras, electromagnetic field meters, voice recorders, and every variety of sensor that the current state of consumer technology makes accessible, have spent nights in the forest and documented their experiences with varying degrees of professional rigor. The reports from these modern investigations echo the historical record with unsettling fidelity. Electronics fail. The same electronics that function perfectly on the drive to the forest, in the parking area at the treeline, in the first few meters of the path, begin to malfunction past a specific threshold. Batteries drain. Cameras reboot. EMF meters read anomalies that the investigators, professional skeptics by training and temperament, cannot account for. The lights continue. Captured on digital camera sensors, on thermal imaging, on multiple simultaneous recording platforms, the orbs persist. Some investigators have identified natural explanations for individual captured anomalies. Lens flare, bioluminescence, light from the city reflected off particular surfaces. But not all anomalies have natural explanations. And the ones that don't sit in the record, unresolved. YouTubers and content creators, some experienced in paranormal investigation, many simply drawn by the location's reputation, have added a new dimension to the documentation of Hoia Baciu. Their footage is less formal, their methodology less rigorous, but their experiences are no less consistent. Cameras cutting out mid-shoot. Sounds appearing on audio that were not audible during recording. The overwhelming psychological experience of being somewhere that does not want you there, a feeling these creators, unused to the vocabulary of paranormal research, struggle to articulate but uniformly describe. One creator, filming a solo overnight in the forest in 2022, captured approximately 40 minutes of footage before their primary camera failed. Their backup camera continued. In the 40 minutes before the primary failed, they documented nothing unusual. In the 3 seconds before the camera shut down, a shape appears at the edge of the frame. Dark, indistinct, moving from right to left with a gait that does not correspond to any human movement pattern the creator could later identify. They did not return to the forest. Most people, once is enough. We return to where we began. The forest at night. The same trees that bent around the shepherd as he walked, as the girl walked, as the researchers walked, as the investigators walked, as the tourists walk today. The same soil that holds whatever it holds, that gives nothing back, that remembers everything while forgetting none of it. The same air, heavy and cool and tasting of pine resin and old earth, that has moved through this place for centuries, touching the same bark, carrying the same sounds, disturbing the same silence. We have theories. We have data. We have photographs and recordings and soil samples and electromagnetic readings and the testimonies of hundreds of people across 6 decades of documented investigation. We have all the tools that science and reason have developed for the specific purpose of taking the unknown and making it known. We have, so far, produced more questions. The shepherd never came back. The girl came back, but not complete. Something of her remained in the trees, or something of the trees remained in her. The researcher photographed something real and never stopped looking for it. The lights still move between the branches at night. The clearing remains empty. The voices, when they speak, ask their question. There are places in this world that resist explanation not because explanation hasn't been tried, but because explanation, however sophisticated, is the wrong tool. They exist in a register that language approaches but cannot enter. They ask questions that facts cannot answer. They are older than the fear they inspire, and they will be here long after the fear is forgotten. Hoia Baciu is one of those places. Some places aren't meant to be understood, only experienced.